Ladies and gentlemen, Raptors fans of all ages, we are back. I'm sitting here in the beautiful Raptors Report studio, ready to get a bead on the Toronto Raptors, who have just completed the preseason and are ready to head into the regular season. Now, if you've been paying attention, the Toronto Raptors have looked great in preseason. They're 4-0. On the plus side, Scottie Barnes looks amazing. I'm expecting a huge year from him. He was injured in the last game, so we'll have to see how that translates, but he has looked really good. Speaking of big, the Toronto Raptors look enormous, and I think that that's going to be one of the defining characteristics of the Raptors this season, is the size advantage that I think that they have over most of the teams in the league. And the last on the plus side, the Toronto Raptors defense looks really good, and we're going to talk about the potential that they have in that category and maybe how that could carry them to a lot of victories this season. On the downside, the Raptors suffered from a number of slow starts against all the NBA teams that they faced. They had a bunch of, lackluster starts. And a lot of that was because of the offense, and there are a number of questions about the offense that I think I'm going to have to go into and answer and talk about. But that could be one of the stumbling blocks for the Toronto Raptors this year. So that's something to keep an eye on. Another thing to keep an eye on, new Raptors. And in fact, there are a number of guys that I think might be a surprise this season, and you're going to have to take a look at. Number one on the list is a guy I've been raving about on Twitter, Javon Freeman-Liberty, who looks very good. He looks like an NBA player. The Raptors scouted him in the Summer League. He played for the Bulls Summer League team, and the Raptors scooped him up, and I'm really glad that they did, because this guy has guard skills, which the Raptors really need. He can pass the ball. He looks like he has a bit of a shooting game. He can get to the basket. Very excited about looking at Javon Freeman-Liberty. The other guy that I think you should keep an eye on, who's new to the roster, is Jalen McDaniels. Now, Jalen McDaniels played for the 76ers last season. He was signed by the Toronto Raptors. He's a really good wing defender, and I think if you watched him during the preseason, you saw that he can shoot the ball a little bit. So if he can combine that defense with some average or above average three-point shooting, he might be an underrated signing and a part of the Toronto Raptors rotation. There are tons of questions to answer all in all, so why don't we just jump in and take a look. Really excited to get this season started. As I mentioned, the Raptors went 4-0 in the preseason. On display during these games was the new 0.5 offensive philosophy championed by head coach Darko Rajakovic, where a player should not use more than 0.5 seconds before making a decision whether to pass, drive, or shoot. During the Kings game, it was rather refreshing to watch the off-ball movement, the quick passing, and Jakob Poeltl distributing from the high post. But oddly, the majority of the success the Raptors had on offense came via ISOs, often after the original play was unsuccessful, and on the fast break. Those two plays were the bread and butter of last season's offense, and it makes a bit of sense that the team, the majority of whom are returning from last year, would find success doing something familiar rather than a complex offense that they're still learning. On the flip side, there are some questions as to whether the system will be effective with the roster as currently constructed. Screen plays, off-ball movement, quick passes, and other things Raptors fans have been lusting for over the past few years are all well and good. But no matter how complex an offensive system is, the ability to make the shots that are created by that offense is still the most important factor. Screen plays are effective for players who can cut inside and finish, or flare outside and shoot the ball. The Raptors have many of the first category: Scottie Barnes, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Jakob Poeltl, Chris Boucher, Precious Achiuwa, the list goes on and on. What they have lacked over the past few seasons has been the three-point firepower that every good offense has at its disposal. Golden State is a great example to use when you want to understand how movement, off-ball screens, cuts, and the effect of shooting gravity work together to create an efficient offense. Curry, Clay, and other shooters use the framework of Kerr's offense to create open shots for themselves, and inside that scheme are buried a plethora of wrinkles that they can use to adapt to different defensive coverages. It's easy to credit the scheme Kerr has put into place, but a huge element of that is shooters of Curry and Clay's caliber that turn the open looks that they get from those schemes into points on the board. The value proposition of having Curry shoot an open jump shot is far different than, say, an open Chris Boucher jump shot. Defenses know this as well, and will allow weaker shooters to shoot threes to their heart's content if it means that they have additional players in the paint to stop drives and collect defensive rebounds. This is what is known as shooting gravity. Good shooters have a lot of it. Teams will cover them far away from the rim, and they demand switches and rotations when they move without the ball. Poor shooters have limited gravity and will often only receive a running closeout on their shot attempts. That shooting gravity can be exploited by the rest of the offense, and when defenses are pulled away from the paint, opportunities to cut to the basket present themselves. The synergy between passing, screens, and shooting gravity gives teams like the Warriors, or as we saw on Sunday, the Kings, a lot of offensive juice. Fred VanVleet's replacement, Dennis Schroeder, is not a prolific three-point shooter. Gary Trent Jr., who had a great game versus the Kings, along with OG Anunoby, Grady Dick, and, knock on wood, Otto Porter Jr., are the players that either have proven to be or project to be plus shooters in the Raptors' potential rotation. It would seem that the players just mentioned will have a large role in the Raptors' new offense. Even players like Malachi Flynn, who completely fell out of Nick Nurse's rotation, may get another opportunity to play under Darko. Unlike the offense, I don't think that there are many question marks about the Raptors' defense. There really is no reason that the Raptors should not have a top 10 defense this season. Poeltl is a good rim protector who is also not a liability in the pick and roll, and fixes one of the largest issues with the team's defense last season. OG Anunoby is one of, if not the best perimeter defenders in the whole league. Pascal Siakam had a down year on the defensive end last year, I think in part because of the amount of minutes he played. Scotty Barnes has not been the kind of defender I think most people were expecting coming into the league, but I think some of that can be explained by inexperience, as well as some bizarre choices by the previous coaching staff, like having him exclusively guard the point of attack where his foot speed was exposed. With Schroeder on the team as a great point-of-attack defender, having Scotty guard larger players will likely help him reach his potential on that end. Lastly, we'll talk about the reserves, because I think that Gary Trent Jr. will be given a large role, and his inconsistency defensively was an issue last season. Gary is a bit of a gambler who racked up a ton of deflections and forced turnovers in Nick Nurse's steal-everything defensive scheme. On the other hand, his defensive fundamentals require work. And in a more traditional defensive scheme, his penchant for ball hawking needs to be scaled back considerably. Precious is another wildcard, as he was extremely impactful defensively 2 seasons ago when the Raptors made the playoffs, and pretty darn bad last year, which is one of the reasons that they fell off in that regard. Otto Porter Jr. and Christian Koloko are 2 players who would be a large boon on the defensive end, but their health is a question mark. Otto Porter Jr. has been very unreliable for his near decade in the league, and Christian Koloko is suffering from a long-term respiratory illness that the team is keeping a tight lid on, saying that he'll be out indefinitely and not much else beside that. Boucher is a decent defender, although limited by his slender build. His ability to block shots on the weak side is an asset, and his length and mobility allows him to challenge perimeter shots. Playing him at center is something that will have to be moderated, as he gives up a lot of size, even against bench bigs. The 2 guys in the rotation that I expect will not be very good defensively are Grady Dick and Malachi Flynn. Flynn is an undersized guard who has had a lot of trouble in switch situations, where he's forced to guard players who have a size advantage. Grady Dick is a rookie, and his foot speed isn't anything to write home about, meaning he'll have to figure out the speed of the NBA as well as learn the schemes, and things will probably be pretty rough for him defensively until he figures that out. Speaking of the scheme, Darko has mentioned that while he wants the team to generate extra possessions off of turnovers, he will be turning the aggressiveness down a notch, as the Raptors were easily the most aggressive team on the defensive end last year, for better or worse. Having a traditional center should help them field a stronger half-court defensive team, and they won't be as reliant on the possession-generating gimmick that they used last season. One thing that really stands out is the size of the team, both offensively and defensively. Now that Poeltl has arrived to shore up the center position and add size on the interior, the size advantage that they should have over most teams will be noticeable. Overall, I'm interested in what the team will offer this season, as I think that there are some strengths that the Raptors have: size, defensive ability, ability to push the ball in transition, as well as some weaknesses: shooting, guard depth, half-court offense, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, that's this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed. I know if you're watching this episode, you're just as excited for the regular season as I am. I'm really pumped up. I'm pretty optimistic. I think that the Raptors will make the playoffs this year. But are you any different? Do you think that perhaps they'll be a play-in team? Maybe they'll miss the playoffs entirely? I'm interested in what you have to say, so please let me know here in the comments and also on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raptors Report. Are there any surprises that you think will happen? Maybe players that step up, players that disappoint? What do you think about the new play-in tournament? Do you think that the Raptors will be successful there? I'm really eager to hear your thoughts, and as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.